there, my name is Jasmine Sky, and I'm here today with what I think is a very fun video. I was inspired by Lindsay Puckett because Lindsay recently got an agent and posted her querying stats video, which I thought was so awesome. I really like that kind of data. And I was like, you know what? Even though I talked a little bit about this in how I got my literary agent video, which I will also link down below, I didn't really go through all of my querying stats there. So I thought it would be fun to give you guys a very data-driven video about what I went through querying in terms of my numbers, and I'll show you some awesome graphs, and it'll be awesome, I think, hopefully, for those of you who want to know the numbers. So, my querying journey. I started querying with my previous YA novel, which was called Kingfisher. Here is an aesthetic of Kingfisher. And I queried 41 agents for 4 months. So I started on January 24th, 2019, and I went all the way until May 21st, 2019. That's when I sent my last round of queries with that sort of first section of querying that I did. In that 4 months, 41 agents, I received 1 full request. Yeah, so that was a 2% request rate for those first 4 months of querying. It's not great. It is not great. But I revised Kingfisher. Actually, I revised it for my MFA thesis novel. Actually, I have it here. Voila, Kingfisher by me. This was my thesis, Kingfisher. And there you go. So even though this didn't get me an agent, I still have this to remember, which is pretty exciting. But yes, this version, the version that became my MFA thesis, I revised in the late summer, early fall of 2019, and then I queried another 37 agents for about 3.5 months. So I queried them from October 11th, 2019, which is basically when I turned my thesis in, through January 30th, 2020. And that was it. That was my sort of last push. January 30th was my last push with Kingfisher to attempt to get an agent with this one. But at that point, I already knew that I had another book coming that I was getting ready to query. So that's when I let this one go in terms of the query trenches, which is fine because I queried 78 times, which is a lot. But in that sort of second section of querying with the revised version of Kingfisher, I did get a slightly better request rate. I received 1 partial request and 2 full requests. So of that second section, it was an 8% request rate. So of the 78 times I queried, I got 4 requests, which is a 5% total request rate. Still not great. 43 rejections, like actual rejections, and 30 no replies. CNRs, as they're called in the querying world, which is closed no reply. I had 30 of those of the 78. So those were my Kingfisher base stats. Now, because I think it's interesting, let's break these stats down a little bit more. Of the 43 rejections that I got, 3 of them were personalized rejections, and 40 of them were form rejections. Now, of course, I can't tell this for sure. Sometimes a form rejection sounds really personalized, and sometimes what I think might be a form rejection might actually be personalized. So I estimated based on what other people had posted were the forms for that agent on Query Tracker, and also just sort of my own sense of what sounded like a form versus something that was personalized. Some of the personalized ones are very obviously personalized, but others are not. So I believe I got 3 personalized rejections and 40 form rejections. Of those 43, my average response time for those rejections, and this was primarily throughout 2019 and a little bit into 2020, but kind of pre-COVID 2020, if this is interesting to you guys, my average response times for rejections were 29 days. And for my requests, I got my 4 requests 1 day after the query, 2 days after the query, 24 days after the query, and 136 days after the query. So as you can see, quite a range. 2 of my requests were basically immediate, and one of my requests was kind of in the same range as my average rejection time, and one of my requests came much, much later, which makes me assume that my query was in a maybe list, and then when the agent went back through the maybe list, then decided to request my full manuscript. So that's what's going on with that. For my fulls, obviously I did not sign with an agent with Kingfisher, so eventually all of them were rejections. I received one personalized full rejection in 12 days after I sent the full, and the partial, I received a form rejection in 18 days. For the other two full requests, I never actually received word, but one of the agents left and the other agent ended up reading the full of my next book, so it got a little complicated, but I'll break that down when I get into my next book. My current book is currently titled Daughter of the Bone Forest, and it is another YA fantasy. I will say, when I queried Kingfisher, the first time I queried it at 97,000 words, I think. The second time I actually queried it at 105,000 words. So it was over what is recommended for a YA fantasy. Usually you want to cap your YA fantasies at 100K, but as you saw, my request rate did go up in that sort of second section because my query was better, the beginning of the book was better, etc. So even though I was over where I should have been word count wise, it was better, though not great. It was only 8% in that second section, which is not a great percentage in terms of request rates in querying. So take that what you will. But Daughter of the Bone Forest, which I queried under the title Shackles of Bone, which I referred to it earlier on in my channel. You would have heard me call it Shackles of Bone. Now it's called Daughter of the Bone Forest, or the Bone Forest for short. The Bone Forest, I started querying on April 23rd, 2020. My last round of queries I sent for the Bone Forest ended up being June 5th, 2020, though technically the last queries I sent for the Bone Forest were when I got an offer of representation, which was on August 4th. But again, that's related to the other agent that had my full, so it's a little complicated. So I really only queried or sent queries for about a month and a half, though it was 4 months from my first set of queries to when I signed with my agent. But definitely I did not query the Bone Forest nearly as long. I was not out in the query trenches nearly as long. Part of that also was I didn't bother sending any queries in the summer. Like, I sent my last round of queries on June 5th because that was also the day of PitMad. So that was kind of the last chance to send queries before publishing just kind of shuts down for the summer. So I didn't send any queries over the summer. And when I got the offer of representation, I was just putting together my final round. I was gonna send out another like 10 queries in like August, and then I was gonna shelve the Bone Forest and move on to my next book, but I got the offer of representation, so I never sent out those final 10 queries, which is totally fine because I'm very happy with the agent that I got. So because of that, because I only got a couple rounds in of querying with the Bone Forest, I queried only 22 agents, and I received 4 full requests. So it's kind of the same number of requests, but much less agents. So it was an 18% request rate, which definitely shows you how well I improved in terms of my querying game. Shows you that if you're not getting a great request rate, it could be that you need to improve your querying game or your first pages, but also sometimes an idea is just more marketable. Daughter of the Bone Forest was a much more marketable idea for a YA fantasy than Kingfisher, because Kingfisher was based off Greek myth, and Greek myth is just really hard to sell as a YA. I did not know that at the time I wrote it and then tried to query it, but I know that now, so I'm not surprised that Kingfisher did not get me an agent. But Daughter of the Bone Forest is a witchy shapeshifter fantasy, and that witches are very in. They were especially very in, you know, a year or 2 years ago. They're starting to get oversaturated, so if you're thinking of what to write next, unless you have a really strong witch idea, I wouldn't necessarily choose a witch idea right now because oversaturation of the witch market is coming. But other sort of fun twists on paranormal stuff is coming back. So yes, Daughter of the Bone Forest, I received 4 full requests, 13 rejections, and 5 no replies. Of those 13 rejections, I received 2 personalized rejections and 11 form rejections. My average response time for query rejections was actually less time than when I was querying Kingfisher. So like, even though I was querying during lockdown and during the beginning of, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic, I received my rejections an average 19 days later. For the 4 full requests, however, those did on average come a little later. I mean, the average is skewed because with Kingfisher, one of my full requests came like really late, but I didn't get any of those like same week full requests. With Bone Forest, my full request came at 19 days, 27 days, 61 days. The final request did come in only 9 days, but that final request was a little bit different. Actually, the last 2 requests, the 61 days and the 9 days, came because of a nudge that I had an offer of representation. So I only actually got 2 full requests before the nudge about offer of representation. One of those 2 full requests turned into my offer, and the other one was just a form rejection. And I received that form rejection almost exactly 2 months after having sent my full to that agent. The other full request turned into an offer at almost exactly a month. So specifically for my agent, Mary C. Moore, as I talk about in my How I Got My Agent video, here's my timeline. I queried her in that last round of agents that I queried on June 5th because she opened up for queries on June 4th. So I was like, yes, gotta sneak it in. So I queried her on June 5th. And then I got the full request from her on July 2nd. I got the email from her on July 4th that was asking if we could have a call. We had the call the same day, and then I signed with her 10 days later on August 14th. So that was the timeline. So really not that long. From the point I sent the query to the point that I signed with Mary was fast in the agent world. Not as fast as some things. Some people are like 2-week turnaround sign with an agent, but for cold querying especially, like this was a pretty quick turnaround, I think, from sending to signing. So that's pretty exciting. And then what happened with the other 2 full requests, when I got that offer of representation on August 4th, I sent out the nudge. Because of when I got the offer and the fact that I hadn't sent queries out in a couple months, I only had 1 open query, and I sent a nudge to that agent, and that was my 61-day full request. So that agent did ask for the full after I nudged with offer of representation, and then gave a very, very nice, polite step aside rejection a couple days after that. It was 6 days after. So I sent the nudges on the 4th after I had my call with Mary, and then this particular agent requested the next day. So that was 61 days after I sent the original query, and then 6 days after that sent the very polite step aside rejection, which was very nice. And I was not actually upset about it because I didn't want to have to make the choice between the 2 because that just sounds scary. So I'm very happy that Mary ended up being my only choice, though this is the complicated part with the other agent, and this is something to keep in mind if you are querying a book. Like if you're querying your books in pretty quick succession and you happen to have fulls or partials out with other books, but then you get an offer on a different book, you should still let the agents know who have your other books that you have an offer on a different book. So the way that I did it, I had 2 offers out on Kingfisher still. One of those offers, the agent ended up leaving agenting, which I saw the notice of a couple months after this all happened. But at the time, I sent her and the other agent, I sent them the emails, and you do it in the same email chain where you sent the full for your previous manuscript. I said, I have been querying a new YA fantasy. In my case, it was another YA fantasy, so it was a pretty easy sort of one-to-one, but even if, for instance, you're querying a middle grade and a young adult novel, and you get an offer on the young adult novel, especially if the people who have your middle grade full request also rep young adult, or you think maybe they might, send them an email that says, I got an offer on a different novel, include the query of that novel, ask them, would you be interested in seeing the full for this novel, for my new novel? If not, then I politely withdraw my other manuscript. Point is, query both agents with my new novel, and I didn't actually count in my 22 agents I queried. I did not count the agent that ended up leaving agenting, because I didn't realize at the time, but like it was never an option anyway, and I never got a reply from that agent about anything. I just saw on her Twitter that she was leaving agenting. So, okay. The other one I queried with Bone Forest, and 9 days later they requested Bone Forest to read. I have no idea if they ever read Kingfisher. It's probable they didn't, because that was my very long, that was my 136 days later request for Kingfisher, was that agent. So they didn't actually, they only had like a couple months, I think, before my my offer of representation on Bone Forest to read Kingfisher, and I don't believe that they ever did. At least I never got any word that they did. So anyway, I sent the full for Bone Forest, but since it was 9 days later that they requested it, and my deadline was 10 days after the offer, it was like quite tight, right? So they emailed me on the day of the deadline saying that they were like halfway through Bone Forest and really loving it. Would I be willing to extend the deadline? If not, they understand and they'll be cheering me on from the sidelines. And I talked about this again a little bit in my How I Got My Agent video, but I sat back and I thought about it. And this was a very good agent as well, like a very good agent. But I just wasn't excited, and I wasn't vibing with it. And just in terms of like style of agenting and what I had heard from clients from both agents, from both Mary and this other agent, I was pretty sure Mary was the better choice for me. And I also was just very impatient to like get started with my journey with Mary. So I took the polite step aside, you know, I apologized for that situation. Obviously, I think if the agent had been able to request the full a little earlier, it's very possible they might have offered. I might have had two conflicting offers, judging by what they said in their, you know, request for me to extend the deadline. They were loving it. But that is what it is, and I'm not upset with how things went, and that's fine. That agent that may have offered also just had a lot more clients than Mary, and it's one of the things I love about Mary is I love being part of a small, more curated client list. Not that the other agent doesn't curate their client list, but it's just larger. And a lot of agents are able to successfully manage that, and that's fine. But for me, for my style, I really like having like very much more of that personal attention from Mary and being part of this sort of small, more intimate client sibling group, right? So anyway, not upset about my choice at all, but that's what happened. So there you go. That was a lot of specifics and discussions, but the final wrap up of my stats, my entire querying journey, which I find this very hilarious. I literally did not realize this until I sat down to write down all of my stats, and I was like, whoa, I sent exactly 100 queries. That's wild. That's wild to me. And of those 100 queries I sent across 2 books, I received 8 requests, 5 personalized rejections, 51 form rejections, 36 no reply rejections, and it all led to 1 offer by my amazing agent who I have now been with for 8 months, so that's pretty exciting. I hope all of this information was helpful to y'all, that you enjoyed seeing all the stats broken down. Hopefully for those of you who are in the query trenches or about to query, especially if you're on your first novel, just know that, you know, this journey can take a while, and I was very lucky to have such a quick turnaround with my second querying journey, and that's part of it. It's just luck and timing for a lot of this process, and you may very well have luck with your first book and pretty quickly into your querying journey with your first book. It definitely happens. Do not count on it, because it's unlikely, and it's better to assume that you will need to query multiple novels and start working on what those novels are going to be. And if you have multiple ideas that you are equally excited about, then maybe try to write the ones that might seem more commercial or marketable. I never try to tell people like you should only write commercial or marketable ideas, because if you really love an idea, even if it's not quote unquote marketable, your passion is going to make for a stronger book, and a stronger book is more marketable than a less strong book. So it's like that. But if you have multiple ideas that you're equally excited about, try to do the ones that you think, or that, you know, if you pitch both ideas to your friends and your family, ask them which one they'd be more excited to read, and try to write that one first. And that might give you a little bit better chance, a little higher request rate in the query trenches, as was the case with Kingfisher versus Daughter of the Bone Forest. But in the end of the day, it was putting in the effort to better my craft, to be able to craft more compelling stories. That is the reason that Mary signed with me with Daughter of the Bone Forest. And we'll see what the rest of my author journey is or will be with that. So thank you guys so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed all of this data and all of that stuff. Thanks to Lindsay for inspiring me to make this video, because I don't know, it was fun. I really enjoyed distracting myself from drafting my current project by doing this. And you guys can expect a writing vlog next week, which I hope you're looking forward to that. It's been a bit of a journey so far with this book, but you'll see that in the vlog. As always, there are links in my description to causes that need your support. Please go check out those links and give your support. I recently called through the links and made sure that I had only the sort of more up-to-date links and things that really need your support right now. So that is down there, and share, donate, give your time, whatever you can do with those. That would be great. You can also support my channel by liking this video, subscribing to my channel, etc. And I look forward to chatting with y'all in the comments.